Today, we're diving into the story of Abraham, a man whose legacy is really defined by two completely different trials. First, you have this incredible test of divine faith that pushes him right to the edge. And then there's this deeply human test of grief that ends up cementing his future in a foreign land. It's an epic story of a son and, of all things, a sepulcher. It all kicks off with one of the most shocking commands you could ever imagine. Just think about it. Abraham waits his entire life for his promised son, Isaac, and then he hears God say this. The language is just brutal in its specificity. Thy son, then thine only son, and just to twist the knife, whom thou lovest. Every single word just adds to the crushing weight of what's being asked. And just like that, the first trial begins. So what do you do when you hear something like that? I mean, how do you even begin to process it? That question is really what makes this story so powerful. Because Abraham's response is, well, it's immediate, it's unquestioning, and it sets him on a path towards one of the most intense tests of faith ever recorded. What's so striking here is that there's zero hesitation. No arguing, no pleading for another way, nothing. Just this methodical, deliberate action. He gets up early, gets the supplies ready, and starts a 3-day journey. Can you imagine the silence on that trip? The thoughts racing through his mind, the absolute weight of every single step for 3 whole days as he walks toward the place where he thinks he has to sacrifice his own son. And then you get this moment that must have just shattered that heavy silence. Isaac, who's literally carrying the wood for his own sacrifice, turns to his dad with this perfectly innocent, perfectly logical question. It's just heartbreaking. Isaac sees the fire, he sees the wood, but he doesn't see the lamb. He has no idea that in his father's mind, he's the lamb. Abraham's reply here is just a masterclass in faith and, frankly, in ambiguity. He tells Isaac, God will provide himself a lamb. Now, is this just a desperate hope? Is it some kind of prophecy? Or is it just a way to spare his son the terror of what's coming? We don't really know. But those words just hang in the air, setting us up for the climax of this whole journey. Okay, so we've arrived at the mountain. This is it. This is where the story hits its unbelievable peak. It's the moment of truth, where Abraham's faith is stretched to its absolute limit, and everything is about to change in an instant. Just watch the sequence of events unfold. He builds the altar, he arranges the wood, he binds his son, he lays him on the altar, he raises the knife. I mean, each action is taking him closer to this final, irreversible act, and it's only at that exact last second that the angel calls out, Abraham, Abraham. The test is over. And just like Abraham said, God provides a substitute, a ram, caught right there in a thicket. And the reward for his obedience? It's incredible. Because Abraham didn't withhold his only son, God doesn't just renew his promise, he magnifies it. His descendants will be as countless as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. So this absolutely terrifying trial ends with the ultimate divine blessing, cementing Abraham's place in history. But the story doesn't end there on that mountaintop, not even close. The whole tone shifts dramatically from this high-stakes divine test to a very real, very human loss. We move on to the second trial. Sarah, his wife, the mother of that promised son, dies. And now Abraham faces a totally new kind of test, one about grief, mortality, and the very practical problem of finding a place to bury his wife. 127 years. That was the life of Sarah. And this number, it's not just a statistic. It grounds us in the reality of a long, shared life that's now over. This was the woman who left home with him, who waited decades for a son with him, his partner through everything. And now, Abraham is alone, and his first job is simply to mourn her. Now, when Abraham goes to the local people, the sons of Hith, listen to the words he uses. It's such a contrast. They see him as a mighty prince, right? A man with status and wealth. But he describes himself as a stranger and a sojourner. This really highlights how vulnerable he is. Despite God promising him this whole land, he doesn't actually own a single square foot of it. He doesn't even have the legal right to bury his own wife. So what does he ask for? A sepulcher, which is basically a permanent tomb. And this is key. He's not just looking for a spot to dig a grave. He wants to acquire a lasting possession, a physical anchor in the land that he's been promised but doesn't yet own. You see? His grief is pushing him to do something that will have huge, long-lasting significance. And this need for a burial plot leads to a pivotal moment. The purchase of this tomb is the very first time Abraham establishes a real, tangible, legal claim to the Promised Land. It's a deal born from sorrow, but it becomes the bedrock of a nation's future inheritance. It's the first little piece of the promise turned into actual property. So let's look at this negotiation, because it's pretty smart. It's all very polite and formal. Ephron the Hittite offers the land for free, as a generous gift. But Abraham is sharp. He insists on paying full price. Why? Because accepting a gift would make him indebted to Ephron, and the ownership could be disputed later. By insisting on paying, he's making the transaction legally ironclad. Ephron names his price, 400 shekels of silver, and Abraham pays it. Right then and there, no haggling. The text is very specific, saying it was current money with the merchant. This means it was a standardized, legitimate weight of silver. This wasn't some symbolic handshake deal. This was a serious official business transaction that no one could argue with down the road. It was an investment. And look at everything he got for that price. It wasn't just the cave. The purchase included the whole field, all the trees on it, everything within its borders. And the deal was made sure, it was legally transferred in front of official witnesses at the city gate, which was basically the town hall and courthouse all in one. This was, for all intents and purposes, the very first deed to the Promised Land. So, we end here. You've got this ultimate test of faith on a mountain, where he was willing to surrender the future. And then you have this very down-to-earth real estate deal to secure a physical piece of that future. Both trials, one of the spirit, one of sorrow, were absolutely essential. They worked together to build a legacy, mixing a divine promise with a real, tangible claim to the land. And it kind of leaves you with this final thought. Maybe our greatest legacies are built not just in these huge moments of faith, but also in our most human, practical, everyday actions.